The stars stretched out in every direction as if the universe itself was an endless sea of possibility. But for the humans of Earth, there was no place in this vast galaxy for them anymore. The Galactic Council had spoken, and the decision was final, their fate, sealed by the will of the ancient races whose civilizations stretched back millennia, and whose grasp of the stars was unchallenged. Humanity was a threat to that order, a new species growing too fast and too recklessly, their expansionist tendencies sparking fear across the galaxy. They had no place here among those who had ruled in peace for so long. On Earth, the leaders of the Confederacy gathered in secret in a cold and sterile command room far removed from the comfort of their palaces. The war had already begun, though none had fired a single shot, yet they knew that the Council would not tolerate their presence any longer. The humans were too unpredictable, their technology evolving at an unprecedented rate, their influence over the galaxy's politics and economics growing stronger by the year. With each passing day, they risked disturbing the delicate balance that the Council had worked so long to maintain. An unanimous vote had been cast by the Council's representatives. All races were in agreement the humans had to be exiled, and so it was done. Earth and its colonies would be severed from the rest of the galaxy, their communication cut off, their access to trade blocked, and any further interaction prohibited. The humans would be forced to live out their existence in the farthest reaches of space alone, and isolated, a punishment that no one thought they would ever escape from. The humans received the news with a mixture of anger and disbelief. They had been wronged. They had never asked for conflict, but their nature was one of survival, and they had fought to expand into the stars long before the Council had noticed them. It wasn't fair, yet there was little they could do about it now. Their space stations went silent, their colonies sealed off, and their fleets stranded in the void. As the Council's decree rang out across the stars, the people of Earth were cast into a cold and lonely exile. For many, the news felt like a death sentence. The Council had underestimated humanity's ability to survive under harsh conditions, but it would not be without its struggles. The colonies would face starvation and disease. The technological gap between the exiled humans and the advanced races of the galaxy would grow wider over time. And yet, even as their ships were cut off from the stars, the human spirit remained unbroken. The human race had faced worse in its past, and had always found a way to push forward even against the odds. In secret, the brightest minds of Earth's Confederacy began to gather their resources and turn their attention to the stars. They would not give up their place in the galaxy so easily. They would rise again and show the Council that humanity was not to be dismissed, that their potential had only just begun to be realized. The seed of rebellion was planted, and though it seemed a distant dream in those dark days of exile, the fire of defiance was kindled deep within the hearts of every human across the galaxy. The humans would return no matter how long it took, and when they did, they would be unstoppable. The years that followed Earth's exile passed slowly for the humans scattered across their colonies and homeworld. The Council had thought that cutting them off from the rest of the galaxy would be enough to break their spirit, but they had underestimated the resilience of the human race for an isolation. Far from the prying eyes of galactic powers, humanity found something unexpected, a new kind of freedom. On Earth, the government consolidated power, its borders firm and unyielding as the people adapted to their new reality. Earth's Confederacy, born from decades of war and strife among the nations, now became a unified force, united not by ideals, but by sheer survival. The people had no choice but to evolve, for the old systems of control that had governed them were no longer available. Instead, they looked inward and turned their attention to a future where their survival depended solely on their own strength and ingenuity. Though isolated, the humans refused to remain in the Dark Ages like the Council had hoped. They began to study the technology they had once gained access to and use it in ways no one had ever imagined. The ships left behind by the Council in the regions surrounding their system were dismantled and reassembled into crude but highly effective vessels. Humans pored over blueprints and data salvaged from past skirmishes with the Council, and what they found stunned even them. They were not as far behind as they had once believed. Human ingenuity, a quality that had always been humanity's defining trait, led them to quickly innovate and adapt alien technologies and theories. At an astounding rate, their scientists and engineers pushed the boundaries of their understanding of the universe, using a combination of reverse engineering, trial, and error. They constructed new energy sources and weapons far beyond the capabilities of what the Council had ever encountered. The colonies, once abandoned and left to struggle, began to thrive once again as the humans rediscovered forgotten resources and developed new technologies that allowed them to survive and even prosper under harsh conditions. Humanity's fleets, once a collection of mismatched ships and outdated designs, were reforged into powerful armadas capable of taking on any threat. Their ingenuity made up for the gaps in their raw power. Their ships were more agile, more adaptive, and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. As decades passed, the humans learned how to manipulate the fabric of space itself, bending light and gravity with newfound technologies that allowed them to move faster than the Council's finest ships. They were no longer a race of wanderers and outcasts. They had become something more. They had become a hidden power in the depths of the galaxy, a force waiting to strike when the time was right. Still, the silence of isolation weighed heavily on the human heart. They had no way of knowing if the galaxy had forgotten them, or if their exile was permanent, but the longer they stayed in the shadows, the more their resolve hardened. They no longer saw themselves as exiles, but as survivors. They had been abandoned, but they had thrived in the darkest corners of the universe. Their thirst for knowledge, exploration, and revenge had only grown stronger with time. And so, as the decades stretched on, the humans continued to plan their return, knowing that when they finally emerged from the darkness, they would be a force unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. They would be ready to remind the Council of the one thing they had forgotten about humanity, the will to rise up and reclaim their rightful place among the stars. The time had come. For years, the humans had been building, planning, and waiting, their desire for vengeance and retribution growing with each passing day. Earth's Confederacy, now a united force more powerful than ever before, had forged its armada in secret, its fleets ready for war. They had studied the stars, understood the weaknesses of the Galactic Council, and exploited every advantage they had gained in isolation. The humans were no longer helpless exiles. They were predators lurking in the dark, waiting for the moment to strike. That moment arrived without warning. One cold, silent night, in the outer rim of the galaxy, the human armada emerged from the depths of space. It was a fleet like no other, sleek, fast, and deadly. Their ships were a marvel of engineering, weapons capable of devastating anything in their path. The design of each vessel was born from the human drive to survive, using stolen technology, their own innovations, and sheer determination. The fleet was composed of hundreds of ships, each one a weapon in its own right, and they were ready for battle. The target was a remote outpost, a small but strategically important installation that the Galactic Council had set up on the fringes of Council-controlled space. It was here that humanity had once been monitored, tracked, and ultimately cast aside. Now it would be the first symbol of their return, a message to the entire galaxy that the humans had come back not to be subjugated, but to reclaim their rightful place among the stars. The attack was swift and brutal. Without warning, the human ships entered the system, their engines silently propelling them across the void. The outpost, once thought to be safe behind the security of Council technology, was caught completely off guard. The human fleet had arrived in the dead of night, before any of the Council's surveillance networks had even registered their presence. Within moments, the first blast of human weaponry tore through the defenses, sending shockwaves across the station. Ships dropped from the sky, one after another, as the humans unleashed their newly developed weapons, plasma cannons, gravity bombs, and energy fields that disrupted everything in their path. The defenders of the outpost scrambled to retaliate, but it was already too late. The humans had thought of everything. The speed, the precision, and the technology they wielded were far beyond what the Council had anticipated. Their tactics were brutal but calculated. No unnecessary losses, no mercy shown. The human fleet used coordinated strikes and sophisticated warfare techniques to decimate the outpost's defenses, leaving no room for the Council forces to recover. Within hours, the station was a wreck, its remains floating in the cold vacuum of space. As the human armada pulled back into the shadows, the message was clear. Humanity was not dead, and they were not forgotten. The Galactic Council had once thought they could exile the humans and be done with them, but now they knew better. This was only the beginning. The news spread quickly, far beyond the boundaries of the attacked station. Across the galaxy, whispers began to form, rumors of the humans' return. The Council, caught off guard and unsure of how to respond, began to take notice. But it was too late. The first blow had been struck, and the humans were ready to strike again. They had proven something far more important than their strength. They had shown that they could not be ignored. The humans, once exiled and powerless, were now an undeniable force in the galaxy. The Council's reign of control had been shaken, and they would soon learn that the humans had never been so dangerous. The shockwave from humanity's first devastating strike reverberated across the galaxy, sending ripples through the Galactic Council. For centuries, the Council had been the unchallenged authority of the stars, an ancient alliance forged from countless species, cultures, and ideologies. No one had dared to challenge them, not until the humans. Their audacity was beyond belief. They had broken the galactic peace with a single strike. And now, the Council was forced to confront a new kind of enemy, one that could no longer be dismissed as an outcast, a primitive species too far removed to matter. In the high halls of the Council, tension ran thick. The alien leaders gathered in their ornate chambers, their faces grim as they watched the reports of the attack unfold. Their military advisors, once confident in their superiority, now found themselves grappling with a cold reality. The humans had advanced far beyond their expectations. Their ships were unlike anything the Council had encountered, fast, agile, and capable of devastating entire stations in a matter of hours. The weapons they had used were so precise, so deadly, that the Council's finest defensive systems had been rendered obsolete. But the Council's leadership was not one to back down from a challenge. The entire galaxy had to know that no one, no species, no military, could threaten the sanctity of their rule without facing dire consequences. They began to mobilize. The most powerful fleets in the galaxy, ships that had once struck fear into the hearts of the galaxy's enemies, were called to assemble. Generations of military expertise would be brought to bear, and humanity would learn the hard way that no one defied the Galactic Council. The Council's response was swift and brutal. Within days, they had assembled a fleet of unprecedented size, a collection of the most advanced warships ever constructed. These ships were the pride of the Council, boasting weapons that could obliterate entire planets. Their strength lay not just in their firepower, but in their coordinated tactics, developed over centuries of galactic dominance. The Council believed that this vast armada would be enough to crush humanity and restore the peace they had so carefully cultivated. However, the humans were no strangers to war. They had spent decades in isolation, learning from their past mistakes and becoming stronger for it. The isolation had given them time to study the galaxy and its threats, and they had spent those years preparing. They had learned how to fight not just with strength, but with cunning and adaptability. They knew that the Council's fleets, though powerful, were not invincible. The humans had witnessed how complacency bred weakness, how the Council's arrogance had allowed them to grow blind to the threat humanity posed. Humanity's strategy was simple but effective. Outmaneuver, outsmart, and outlast. Their ships, though fewer in number, were faster and more agile than the Council's vast armadas. Human fleets struck without warning, using stealth tactics to get in close before unleashing devastating surprise attacks. They didn't fight head-on. They knew that doing so would be suicide. Instead, they hit at the heart of the Council's weaknesses, isolating smaller fleets, sabotaging communication channels, and striking vulnerable supply lines. Battle after battle, the humans proved that they could not be ignored. The Council's fleets, though technologically superior, began to falter. They had underestimated their opponents. The humans fought with a ferocity and ingenuity that even the Council's experienced commanders had not expected. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy, for a future they had been denied. Despite the power of the Council's Armada, cracks began to appear in their resolve. Some Council races, once unified in their disdain for humanity, began to question the wisdom of their decisions. Alien factions, once loyal to the Council, began to whisper of betrayal and weakness. There were rumblings of dissent, whispers of rebellion. The humans were shaking the very foundations of the Council's rule. It was clear that the old order was starting to crumble, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Council had thought they could silence humanity with their exile. Now, they were learning a painful lesson. Never underestimate the resilience of the human spirit. As the humans continued their relentless campaign against the Galactic Council, their victories began to echo far beyond the reach of their own fleets. The galaxies that lay beneath the Council's control, regions where species had long suffered under the weight of oppression, began to stir. Whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire, and the flame of resistance that had long smoldered in the shadows found its spark in the wake of humanity's defiant return. The Council, once so confident in its rule, began to realize that their control was slipping. They had expected the humans to be a fleeting threat, something to squash quickly and efficiently. But the humans had proven to be far more than that. With each victory, their influence grew, and their actions inspired other races to rise up. The oppressed alien civilizations, once paralyzed by fear of the Council's might, began to question their loyalty to the once unassailable power. Long-suppressed factions, unable to withstand the Council's iron grip, saw in humanity's strikes the possibility of a future where they too could be free. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Small, covert groups of rebels began to make their presence known in the darkest corners of the galaxy. They started with sabotage, stealing weapons and disrupting the Council's operations. These rebellious acts were initially dismissed as isolated incidents, but they grew in frequency and severity. Communications between Council members began to fracture as loyalists began to turn against one another. No longer was the galactic peace as unbreakable as it had once seemed. The humans had shown the galaxy what was possible if you dared to fight back. On countless worlds, enslaved or oppressed species who had once thought their fates sealed began to rise up against their Council overlords. The more the humans struck at the Council's forces, the more cracks began to appear in the grand facade of unity. The first true rebellion came from a previously quiet race, the Drav, whose homeworld had long been a resource-rich world exploited by the Council. When news of the human attacks reached them, they saw their opportunity. They launched a coordinated uprising, taking over key mining operations and sending shockwaves through Council territories. What began as a localized insurgency quickly spread to neighboring systems, where other oppressed races, emboldened by the humans' audacity, joined in the uprising. Across the galaxy, more revolts sparked into life. The Xilians, a species once reduced to a vassal state of the Council, began a campaign of open resistance, cutting off vital trade routes and seizing military installations. The Yaloth, a warrior race long subdued by Council diplomacy and economic strangleholds, saw their chance to break free. The quiet rebellion had evolved into a full-scale uprising, as more and more species realized the power they could wield when united against their former oppressors. The humans had, whether intentionally or not, become symbols of resistance. Their message was clear: freedom could be reclaimed, even from the most powerful of rulers. They had proven that a single race, once abandoned and forgotten, could rise from the depths and strike fear into the heart of the Council. Now, entire star systems were beginning to rally behind them, offering ships, weapons, and soldiers to the human cause. Humanity's war was no longer theirs alone. It had become the galaxy's war. The Galactic Council, seeing this growing rebellion spreading like a disease, began to frantically search for a solution. But the truth was becoming unavoidable. The unity they had once relied upon was cracking. Species that had once bowed to the Council's rule were now questioning everything, and the once unstoppable power of the Galactic Council was no more. Their control over the galaxy, built over millennia, was slipping through their fingers, and all the while, the humans were waiting, watching, and preparing for the moment when they would strike again. The spark of rebellion had been lit, and it was growing into an inferno that the Council would soon be unable to contain. Humanity was no longer alone in their struggle. The galaxy had begun to stand with them. The Galactic Council, once an omnipotent force that controlled the heartbeat of the galaxy, found itself on the defensive for the first time in millennia. The rebellion, sparked by humanity's surprise strike, and fueled by oppressed species across the galaxy, had reached a fever pitch. The core worlds, once the jewel of the Council's power, now stood on the precipice of war. These worlds, lush with resources and the center of the galaxy's political and economic infrastructure, had never felt the threat of a full-scale conflict. But now, the core worlds were teetering on the brink of destruction. The humans, their forces bolstered by a growing coalition of rebel species, turned their attention to these prized worlds. They knew that to truly dismantle the Council's power, they had to strike at the heart of its authority. If the core fell, the rest of the galaxy would follow. The first target was the industrial world of Meriden, a central hub for the Council's production of starships and military equipment. It was a fortress planet, surrounded by a web of defenses that made it seem impenetrable. The Council had always believed that no one could touch the core without facing certain annihilation. But humanity had learned to strike fast and strike hard. And Meriden would be no different. The attack was meticulously planned, and the humans moved quickly. Their fleets, now larger and more coordinated than ever, had learned the art of surprise. They did not assault Meriden directly. Instead, they disabled the planet's communication and defense networks using a combination of hacking and electromagnetic pulses. Within hours, the planet was isolated from the rest of the galaxy. The Council's fleets, stationed in nearby systems, could not respond fast enough. When the human fleet arrived at Meriden's orbit, it was a devastating spectacle. Their ships, equipped with advanced cloaking technology and powerful weaponry, appeared as ghosts in the sky, undetected until it was too late. The Council's massive defense cannons fired wildly, but the human ships were faster, darting in and out of range with precision and speed. Waves of fighters and bombers descended from their motherships, striking critical infrastructure points. Plasma bombs exploded across the planet's surface, turning once thriving cities into rubble. The Council sent reinforcements, but they were met by a coalition of rebel forces, Xilians, Drav, Yaloth, and others, who had pledged to aid humanity's cause. These species, once subjugated by the Council, now fought alongside the humans, their resolve strengthened by years of oppression. Together, they brought the full might of their combined fleets to bear against the Council's forces. The battle raged for days, but the outcome was inevitable. Meriden, a symbol of the Council's strength, fell. As the dust settled over the ruined planet, the message was clear. The core worlds were no longer safe. The rebellion had moved from the fringes to the heart of the galaxy. The Council, stunned by the loss of one of their most crucial industrial hubs, scrambled to regroup and retaliate. But the humans had already set their sights on the next target, the once unassailable world of Icaros, home to the Council's central command and the seat of their power. The battle for the core worlds had begun in earnest. With each victory, humanity's rebellion gained momentum. The galaxy watched in awe as the underdogs, once exiled and forgotten, turned the tide of war. The Council, now reeling from the loss of Meriden and the growing rebellion across its territories, found itself in a war it was ill prepared for. What had started as a small spark had now become an inferno threatening to engulf everything the Council had built. And humanity, fueled by years of isolation and the desire to reclaim their place in the stars, was ready to finish what they had started. The final confrontation for control of the galaxy was fast approaching. The rebellion had ignited a fire that spread across the galaxy, and now, at the heart of it all, the battle for the very soul of the galaxy was taking place on Icaros. Once a shining beacon of the Galactic Council's power, the planet was home to the Central Command, the Council Chambers, and the ruling elite. Icaros was more than just a world. It was a symbol of the Council's unchallenged dominance, and humanity's audacious strike at it would mark the final stage of their relentless war. The human fleet, now bolstered by rebel forces and hardened by years of guerrilla warfare, made its way toward the heart of the Council's stronghold. Icaros was heavily defended, its orbit guarded by a network of warships and automated defense systems. The planet's surface was fortified with the best the Council had to offer: shielded bunkers, military academies, and heavily guarded research centers where weapons of mass destruction were developed. It was a place of untold power, and humanity knew that taking it would not only cripple the Council's ability to wage war, but send a message that could not be ignored. But humanity's success had not come without cost. The Council's counterattacks had left the human fleets battered, their supplies running thin. Rebel forces had sustained heavy casualties, and yet with each battle, their resolve only grew stronger. They had learned from their mistakes and adapted, each skirmish making them more skilled, more dangerous. They were no longer a mere group of exiles seeking survival. They were an army with a purpose: to tear down the empire that had exiled them and claim their place in the stars. As the human fleet neared Icaros, the full scope of the task ahead became clear. The Council had not been idle. The planet's defense systems were upgraded to the highest standard, and the fleets stationed in orbit were the finest the Council had to offer. But there was one advantage humanity possessed: intelligence. Over the years, they had infiltrated the Council's ranks, slowly chipping away at their security and learning their strategies. It was a gamble, but humanity had learned the art of patience. In a series of coordinated strikes, the humans and their rebel allies launched the first phase of their attack. Their fleet, though smaller than the Council's, was fast and flexible. They struck with precision, targeting critical points in the defense grid that had been overlooked in the past. EMP devices disabled communications, while silent strike teams infiltrated the outer defense stations, disabling automated systems and weakening the heavy fortifications. The humans didn't waste time with frontal assaults. They hit where it hurt, cutting off Icaros from any immediate reinforcements. As the outer defenses crumbled, the final assault began. The full force of the human Armada, supported by the coalition of rebels, moved in for the kill. Battleships, once primitive and disorganized, now formed a deadly array of firepower, while bombers and assault ships bombarded Icaros' surface. The planet's once pristine skies were torn asunder by the roar of combat. Massive explosions shook the surface, and entire districts were obliterated in seconds. The Council's command centers, the heart of their operations, were hit with devastating blows, as the humans and their allies targeted key infrastructure with ruthless efficiency. On the ground, chaos ensued. Rebel forces, equipped with human-made tech, stormed the bunkers and research facilities. The Council's elite forces, though highly trained, were no match for the combined might of the humans and their allies. Every building was a battleground, every corridor a death trap. Humanity's soldiers, hardened by years of conflict, fought with a ferocity born of necessity. The Council's defenders, once so sure of their invincibility, found themselves retreating as the humans closed in on their final objective. Inside the heart of Icaros, the Council's leadership convened in the central command hub, unaware that the planet's fall was imminent. They had underestimated the tenacity of humanity, just as they had done all those years ago when they exiled them to the fringes of space. But now, the inevitable had come. Humanity had proven that they were not a species to be exiled, ignored, or forgotten. The siege of Icaros was nearing its climax. The Council's fate hung in the balance, and humanity was determined to see it through to the end. The war that had begun with a single strike on an outpost had grown into a full-scale rebellion, one that would forever alter the galaxy's power structure. The humans were no longer exiles. They were conquerors, and Icaros would fall. The final battle had come. Icaros, the heart of the Galactic Council's power, lay in ruins. The once immaculate cityscapes were now crumbling under the weight of relentless assault. The Council's defenses had been shattered, their fleets annihilated, and a leadership that had once ruled with supreme authority now scattered and desperate. The humans, alongside their growing coalition of rebel species, had brought down the seemingly indomitable empire. The air was thick with the scent of victory and the dust of destruction, as the last remnants of the Council's power were crushed beneath the relentless march of humanity. Inside the central command facility, the last remnants of the Council's leadership huddled in fear. The humans were closing in, and there was no escape. The once mighty leaders, creatures of arrogance and entitlement, now faced the consequences of their own hubris. Their plans, their strategies, their entire order had been unraveled by the very race they had once cast aside. Humanity's revenge was not just a battle fought with weapons. It was a battle for justice, for freedom, for a future denied to them for too long. They had shown that no force, no matter how vast, could silence the will of those determined to rise. The doors to the command chamber burst open, and the leaders of humanity stepped inside, their faces etched with the scars of war, but filled with unwavering resolve. Standing at the forefront was Commander Lyra Valen, the woman who had led the humans and their allies through countless battles, the one who had united the disparate factions of the galaxy under the banner of rebellion. She gazed out at the council members, who cowered in their seats, their once imposing figures now trembling in defeat. "We're here to reclaim what was stolen from us," she said, her voice steady and cold. "You thought we would be forgotten. You thought we would remain exiled, powerless, but we are stronger than you ever realized. This galaxy will no longer bow to tyranny." Her words were a declaration, not just to the Council, but to every species in the galaxy. The fight for freedom had not ended with the fall of Icaros. It had only just begun. Humanity, once an exiled race, had now proven that they could reshape the very fabric of the galaxy. Outside the shattered walls of Icaros, the victorious human and rebel fleets began to disperse, their ships floating in the vastness of space, each bearing the marks of countless battles. The coalition had grown, and its influence now spanned entire systems. The Galactic Council's control, once an iron fist that had crushed opposition with impunity, was now a relic of the past. The rebellion had not only liberated humanity, it had freed the galaxy itself. The Council's former leaders were taken into custody, their fates left to the judgment of the people they had once oppressed. There would be no more trials, no more false promises of peace. The galaxy would govern itself now, with the voice of every species counted equally in the Grand Councils to come. The humans, once scattered and disorganized, would now help lead this new era, one born not from the conquest of the strong, but from the unity of the oppressed. Back on Earth, humanity began the slow process of rebuilding their homeworld, devastated from years of isolation and war, but now rich with the knowledge gained from their long exile. The cities were alive with the hum of progress, and the future that had once seemed so uncertain now appeared bright with possibility. Humanity, having cast aside the shadows of the past, now looked to the stars not as exiles, but as equal stewards of the galaxy's destiny. But even as the dust settled, there were whispers. The galactic peace that had once been held by the Council had fractured. New alliances would be formed, new conflicts would arise, and new challenges would emerge. But this time, humanity would be at the center of it all, not as outsiders, but as one of the galaxy's guiding forces. The humans had proven that no matter how great the enemy, no matter how insurmountable the odds, the will to survive and fight for a better future could break any chain. The galaxy had changed forever. A new era had begun, and it was humanity that had sparked its dawn.